The first one is Daniel Press. Daniel is a professor of environmental studies at UC Santa Cruz. He is an environmental policy analyst and scholar and the author of 3 books, and was also appointed executive director of the UC Santa Cruz Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems. And our second speaker for this session is Dara Silverstein. Dara is Stanford Residential and Dining Enterprises Sustainable Food Program Manager. She is a lecturer in both Earth Systems and also at the D School at Stanford. And before joining Stanford, she managed Harvard's Food Literacy Project and worked at Harvard's Office for Sustainability. So what we're going to do is have talks by both Daniel and then Dara, and then we're going to have a short audience Q&A with both of them together at the end. So save your questions for that. And with that, let's welcome Daniel.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. Okay. Well, greetings from UC Santa Cruz, that other UC down the road. I like to refer to you guys as that other UC up the road. So flip it around this time. So what I'd like to do today is just briefly give you an introduction to what I'd like to call an improbable center, an improbable university agroecology farm and garden space. And I'm calling it improbable because UC Santa Cruz, which recently celebrated its 50th anniversary, it opened in 1965, was not at all conceived as an ag school. It was not a place where you were going to go do agronomy or plant science or viticulture and enology, which is what I did at UC Davis, that other. So there's a history there, and then there's this. There's an interesting program that you might like to learn about. An interesting and I think fairly successful experiment in alternative agriculture and food and a critical food system that is at Santa Cruz. So what you're looking at here is the farm, the UC Santa Cruz. It has a terrible acronym, CASFIS. Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems. So I just like to call it the farm and garden. So this is the farm, and what you're seeing is that we have about 33 acres, 30 acres in cultivation, all organic. You can see some greenhouses, some hoop houses, and some other features. The center uses a combination of tractor-cultivated fields and hand-cultivated gardens. So I'll tell you more about that. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary. I like to exaggerate a little bit, so it's here, full disclosure, I'm exaggerating. I like to say that we are the mothership of organic ag. If you go to an organic farmer in California, there's a good chance we trained them or we trained whoever trained them. It's not perfectly true, okay? So that's my exaggeration. But we have had a significant impact. And so we celebrated 50 years at our newly restored hay barn. Alice Waters came and spoke. It was a lot of fun. So we really have been there for a long time. We manage quite a wide diversity of spaces on campus. This is actually the Chadwick Garden that was founded in 1967. We call it the Chadwick Garden because in 1967 the UC Santa Cruz students were looking around trying to have some feeling, some way of connecting with their campus. There was no central plaza. It was the summer of love. The Vietnam War was underway, and they wanted a place where they could connect to their campus. They landed on this very eccentric, peripatetic, Shakespearean actor turned biodynamic gardener named Alan Chadwick, who was reputedly a disciple of Rudolf Steiner. And he came and he picked a south-facing poison oak and redwood covered slope and said, if we can do a garden here using biodynamic techniques, French intensive digging, then we can do it anywhere. And that's what they did. So now this 4-acre piece has over 120 varieties of apples, old varieties, some as from the 17th century, flowers and other crops as well. And what the heart of this, the center, what it's most known for, I think, is an apprentice program. And now this is where not being an ag school maybe had some advantages. In the early 1970s, the students who had had a lot of success with their garden asked the chancellor at the time, they said, hey, could we have more land? One thing UC Santa Cruz has is land. We got a lot of land. It's not, you don't have any land, but we've got land. So they asked the chancellor says, okay, yeah, sure, fine, you can have, these acres over here. And so, being the early 1970s, they got some draft horses and put up teepees. I'm not kidding. And started farming with horses and living in teepees. And I just would like you to imagine going to your chancellor right now and saying, hey, I got this idea. See, they're going to live on campus in teepees, right? And we're going to have horses and donkeys. How do you think that's going to go? So after a while, people said, well, how are we going to train folks in these techniques? And they hit on the idea of running a program through UC Extension, through continuing education arm of the University of California. And so, believe it or not, the apprentices come in April, about 40 to 45 of them, and they live on site, and they stay through October, and they learn very intensively about crop planning and planting, weeding, irrigation, all that, all in the organic space. Okay, so they used to live on tents, on pallets under these trees, but through some grants we were able to build some tent cabins. So now we have, now you can feel like you're camping in a national park and farming at the same time. So we have graduated about 1,500 apprentices from the program over the last 45 years or so, but we recognize that despite my exaggerated claims, that we don't have that much of a reach compared to the need out there. So we have published for many years our teaching manuals. We have 2 teaching manuals. This is the one that teaches farming and gardening. And this is intended for instructors. It's not intended, you can definitely get a lot out of it if you're just wanting to learn about farming and gardening, but how would you teach this is what we have here. We just updated it recently. This is free to download on our website. It's been downloaded 20, 30,000 times. So it is used widely around the world. And this is the counterpart. This is a marketing manual. So many of you know about CSAs, Community Supported Agriculture. We didn't invent them, but we were an early proponent and user of the CSA model. But we also have other techniques that are about direct marketing here provided in this manual. This is a picture of our greenhouses, and the reason I want to show you this is because when we have apprentices and undergraduates come to the center, we train them and rotate them through a whole lot of different techniques. We have some that are working in tractor cultivated fields, some working in gardens that they might that look very much like what you might see in urban gardens, urban agriculture. We also train in propagation. So by that I mean, how do you develop the right soil mixes? How do you save seed, share seed, grow from seed, grow starts, grow them for sales, grow them for your own use? It's unlikely if you are interning or apprenticing in a small urban garden or a small farm that you'll learn the propagation piece of it. But of course it's terribly important right there. We have a pretty extensive network of our alumni, and our alumni have gone on to do tremendous things. So we, Karen Washington, who co-founded the Black Urban Gardeners group in New York City, won the James Beard Award. She is the godmother of New York urban gardening. She's our alumna. Catherine Sneed, who founded the Prison Garden Project. Anybody heard of the Prison Garden Project? That's our alumna, Catherine Sneed, who had to solve the problem of how do you get prisoners to garden without metal. No metal. Can't do that in prison, but they figured it out. And we also have had people go into the ag policy space, the ag and food policy space. So it's not just people who come to learn how to grow. We also emphasize very, very, very profoundly the food justice aspect of sustainable ag and food. It's you know, maybe in the late 60s, early 70s, it was really all about growing pretty plants without chemicals. Today, it's really much more about food access, food justice, and how these things come together in one place. We also, of course, are on the university campus, and so we host a lot of undergraduates, mostly in environmental studies, my department, but we are finally working on a new degree, so I hope to be able to come here in a couple of years and announce that we have a new degree in agroecology and sustainable food systems so that students can get a degree in that. So here they are doing one of their labs out in the fields. Here they are learning about potato planting. Here they are looking at moisture levels in the Chadwick Garden. And of course, we're also a production farm. So that I think is a very valuable aspect to it. We actually grow to sell. We grow and we have a CSA. We have a direct outlet in the form of a farm stand, and increasingly we're growing for our own dining halls, and I'll say more about that in a second. So there's the market cart. We are also a research center. So now this is where not being part of the land grant schools, not being UC Davis, could have been a liability, because if you're at an ag school, you have a research station, you have research scientists, and you have access to USDA money and so on for research. We have had to struggle to get all that, but of course, I'm pleased to say that we've succeeded quite well. One example of that is work that colleagues of mine, Carol Shannon and Joji Muramoto, are doing on strawberries. So if you're at Santa Cruz, you'll quickly see that the climate is different from here. From Santa Cruz down into the Salinas Valley is not only the salad bowl for the country, but it's also one of the centers for strawberries. So if you eat nice, delicious, gorgeous, beautiful tasting organic strawberries, good chance that they came from the Monterey Bay, all right? Strawberries are fastidious, uptight prima donnas. You look at them sideways and they just say, I'm out of here. Very, very prone to wilts and rot and this and that and the other. Oh, terrible. And the conventional way to deal with that is to put a tarp on the landscape, destroy every living thing underneath there, irritate people working the fields as well. And then you're basically putting a strawberry plant into a dead lattice, a dead structure that you're adding inputs to. That's the conventional way to grow strawberries. Methyl bromide was used, now it's chlorobicrin and others. So my colleagues developed a technique that was simultaneously figured out in the Netherlands and in Japan. Now, what do you suppose might relate those two spaces in agriculture?
Very limited land.
Well, more limited.
Limited land. Limited land.
Limited. No, I want something else. Water.
Arable or
flooded.
Yeah.
flooded fields. Okay, so when you, apparently what they discovered, what ag researchers in Japan and the Netherlands discovered, is after they drained flooded fields, they were able to grow crops in there that previously had been subject to all kinds of wilts and diseases. So something about the anaerobic environment was out competing the diseases that were the soil-borne diseases that were there, and then they could have 1 or 2 rotations of crops that would otherwise be very susceptible to those diseases. So we've adapted that to the strawberry system. So we build the strawberry beds, we put a carbon source so that there's something for microorganisms to munch on, tarp it, flood it with drip, let it get really completely saturated in anaerobic, microorganisms do their thing, and then you plant strawberries in there, and you can get 1 or 2 cycles without verticillium wilt, without the wilt there. And then you, in our region, you rotate in broccoli, romaine, and so on, and then you start over again. So this has been incredibly successful. Here's what it looks with the prep. It's been incredibly successful. In 6 years, we went from 0 commercial acres using this technique to now over 1,500 commercial acres using this technique. And I mention this because I want to draw attention to the way in which those of us in agroecology and sustainable agriculture need to address the problems of people trying to grow sustainably. Just like the extension agents at the conventional ag schools have done for the last century, you are basically trying to solve problems of growers. Growers are saying we have pest problems, we have yield problems, we have all kinds of agronomic challenges. How can we address these? Those questions have been relatively unaddressed in the organic space, in the sustainable ag space, biodynamic space, whatever you want to call it. And so we try to address that because that's our mission, that's our mandate. Okay. We have a new headquarters. We have a new restored hay barn. This is an 1870 structure that was on site, on the UC Santa Cruz site. It is all timber joinery. Here's what it looks like on the inside. So we use it for classes and so on. I'm just bragging. We are other things as well. We host Life Lab. How many of you have heard of Life Lab? A few of you. If you've been through the California school system and your school had a garden, how many of you had that? A few more, yeah. So Life Lab was developed about 45 years ago as a way of delivering science education through gardening. And so you have a curriculum, teachers with their students plant garden boxes, and they learn about science, about plants and insects through the gardens, and then they eat that. So we are the headquarters for Life Lab. Life Lab has all of its instructional materials there, and we host about 3,000 school-age kids a year on our site who come with their